Hello, welcome to the Family Influence on Development course. This course was made for the purpose of informing parents on the influence of family on children's development based on insights from current scientific articles and college lecture materials. This course will describe what child abuse is and teach the long-term causes of child abuse, and provide personal application on how to not be an abusive parent. What is development? Development occurs in different domains, i.e. areas: biological changes, i.e. changes in physical being; social changes, i.e. changes in social relationships; emotional changes, i.e. changes in emotional understanding and emotions themselves; and cognitive changes, as in changes that in thought and process, or thought processes. Principles of lifespan development. Development is lifelong. This belief has two separate parts. First, the potential for development continues through an entire lifespan. Development may involve processes that do not occur at birth but emerge throughout the lifespan. Development is also multidimensional and multidirectional. Multidimensional refers to the understanding that development cannot be described by a single criteria, such as increases or decreases in behavior. Multidirectional is the idea that there is no single normal path that development should take. Development also includes both gains and losses. Development is placed within context and in history. What is child abuse? The Canadian Red Cross formed official definitions for child maltreatment. Below are their definitions for emotional abuse, family violence, physical abuse, neglect, and sexual abuse. Emotional abuse is defined as a chronic attack on a child or youth's self-esteem by a person in a position of trust or authority. This includes rejecting, degrading, isolating, terrorizing, corrupting, ignoring, and exploiting. Now we're going to do a practical application where we take the definitions of abuse and we apply them into our own lives. Like, what does this look like practically? So first, we're going to look at what not to do. So I'm going to ask Josh, who's my audience here, a friend of mine, how do parents reject their children?
I think parents can reject their children by not providing certain things that a child needs.
That would come under the kind of the idea of neglect. So rejection would have to do with their personal identity.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be not being there for important events for the child. For example, maybe not attending the child's soccer practice.
Yeah.
Or in not really taking interest in those things, not really being involved in those things.
I think also rejecting your children kind of can take the look of like a parent saying that a kid looks goofy, or a kid has a weird taste in music or weird outfits, but is rejecting who the kid is inside, who it wants to be, how the child wants to dress, and who the child feels that they are, whether they're more old-fashioned or whether they're more modern in their dress, or depending on a number of things. A parent rejects their child when they reject their child's appearance, their child's personal identity. Now, how do parents degrade their children? Degrade, as defined as to be made undesirable. How do parents make their children feel undesirable?
By not making them feel important, by not really believing in them. Could be one example is if you don't believe that your child is capable of something, and you're not really expecting much of your child. That could be one way, or just even just normal things like saying mean things to them would be that.
And you could even apply that to some religious views too. Like, you could teach your child that God made them and that they are special and everything about them is what God wanted them to be and loved them for, and that they will be who they are forever. Or you could teach them reincarnation, which would teach us, or whoever, that you have been every person, or you have been multiple other people who have existed in the past, and you will be other people, so you actually aren't you, and you lose your identity, right? Because so much of who you become totally different. You're not yourself anymore, and you don't get to be yourself when you die. And your parents aren't also themselves when they die, so that could be an example of degrading their children, which might be, they might not know it, but that's would be like teaching them bad theology. How do parents isolate their children?
I would say parents can isolate their children from friendships. Maybe if they're too protective of their child, they could possibly not allow them to go out and do certain things, have certain experiences. I think that would be an example.
Yeah. I think also sometimes it comes to a point where the parent actually isn't trying to protect them, but actually just doesn't care and doesn't introduce them to people, doesn't put them in social situations because they don't care, or not teaching their child how to socially integrate by leading them into conversations and stuff. How do parents terrorize their children? Terrorize is defined as to fill with terror or anxiety.
I would say one way would be if they're threatening the child, or constantly using the phrases like, "Oh, if you do this, then this is gonna happen," or like maybe constantly putting worry inside them, causing a lot of anxiety.
Yeah, I think also you can cause terror and anxiety in a child when you tell them that you're never going to find love, you're never going to have someone treat you well, you're never going to have a good life, life keeps on getting worse, right? And they'll come to a point where even if there's an opportunity for them to find a partner that will treat them well, they have like an abusive partner, they're not going to leave the potentially abusive marriage before they get married, because they'll think, oh, well, no matter what, I'm going to be abused because that's what my dad said, that no one will ever treat me well, and or I will never find joy, rather than asking God for joy in their life. How do parents corrupt their children? Corrupt is defined as to expose to immorality.
I would say exposing them to movies or video games, things that could be violent, that maybe the child's not ready for yet, especially in those early years before the child can recognize the difference between fiction and reality. In those early growing up years, they can't tell the difference, and that would be when that happens.
Right, and I think you can corrupt your children to immorality. Immorality, it takes such a broad scope. Let's say you show your child a movie where people are getting tortured. Well, that's horrible, and most people shouldn't ever even see that in their lifetime. But especially when they're younger, or even in their teenagers, because there's so much going on when someone's a teenager with all their emotions. Showing them that can wreck their life forever, and often does, I think. How do parents ignore their children?
Parents can ignore their children by not being present, not really, especially when maybe in that stage when the child's asking you a lot of questions, if you're just kind of tired of that and you're not really answering their questions, they're kind of in that stage for a reason. They're trying to figure out the world around them. and if you're not really providing much answers to that, that would be ignoring an important part of their learning process, I would say, during that stage.
Yeah, and you can ignore kids by just not doing things with them every day, and when they try and talk to you, not really caring about what they say, or being interested in what they're saying, or their day, or their life. How do parents exploit their children? Exploit as is defined as to unfairly take advantage of someone. As to how you exploit someone.
There's definitely many ways that someone could get exploited. There's even to make the child work when they're like super young, so that the household can have more money. If that would be one way.
Right, because a child's job isn't to be the parent and to provide for the family.
Right.
They're already in school, and then they're taking on the job of the parent as well. That would be an example of exploiting. I think another example of exploiting is not saving up money for their future and their education.
Using it for your personal instead.
Yeah. What to do? So we're going to look at the opposite of these like what is abuse now. If we found out what abuse is, then we have to not do those things. So we're going to look at examples of what to do. How do parents accept their children? Now this is in regards to just who they are as a person, like the way that they look, the way they act, who they are, their personhood, like who they are. How does a parent accept their child?
A parent can accept their child by allowing them to go into their desires, like what they like let's say they into their hobbies, and allowing them to explore those things. Like if their child is interested in sports or certain hobbies, helping them lean into those things. And even if it's not what you want personally, maybe you wanted your child to play soccer, but they want to play basketball. You have to accept what they want to do, and that would be an example, I guess.
Yeah. Also, I think another example of accepting your child is complimenting them consistently. I love your voice, I love the way you sing, I love your laugh, you're so beautiful. All these things, that they're basically a mirror image of what happens in the sub-book of Song of Songs, of what is a depiction of what is love supposed to be, is constantly complimenting one another and loving everything about each other. And I think that's a really great way to accept children. How do parents make their children feel valuable?
I think like what you said with compliments, definitely.
Yeah.
Reminding them that it's okay, that they that there's nothing wrong with who they are and how God made them to be.
Mm-hmm. And how do parents prevent their children from being isolated?
I would say getting your child involved in activities, and if they don't know what they want to do, maybe help even just putting them in like into a sport and letting them like maybe give it a try, or could be maybe there's a group thing or something like that.
Yeah, I think a really great way to keep children from being isolated is to put them in lots of social situations, invite people to the house all the time, and when you're having a conversation with adults, like, or even with like any conversation, invite your child in and find a way to integrate them. And then they can learn to socialize, but they'll feel safe in the situation because you're their parent and you're there. How do parents decrease fear in their children?
I would say by not giving them unnecessary things to be anxious over. Like not saying, oh, what if this, what if that around them a lot. Instead, just as much as you can, avoiding those types of sayings.
Yeah, I think like best ways to decrease fear in your child is to say, you're going to be okay, you're getting stronger and stronger every day.
Comfort them.
Yes, you're going to be, this will go away, you're going to be okay, and refraining from saying things such as like, you're going to have a horrible life, you suck, or you're never going to get anyone to take care of you or love you, and everyone hates you. Rather than saying that, just saying, everybody, you have a value, and even if people don't see it, then you don't have to be afraid of people rejecting you too, because then they take away that fear too. They say you have value, and even if people don't see it, there is still there, and there's just something hiding it from them. Okay, how do parents keep their children from being exposed to immorality?
If you want to watch a certain show that has violence in it, then you should do it when your child isn't around. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, like making sure that they don't watch any really violent, even mildly violent movies until they're almost adults. I would say maybe if they're a teenager, you can kind of gauge how stable your child is when they're a teenager, if they can handle it. But I would still limit it because I think that it's like watching the immorality and watching things that they would never experience in normal life. Suddenly now they watched all these movies. Now basically they're trauma survivors because they've watched all of these things that they should never have to experience or witness in their life. How can a parent give to a child? Oh no, how can a parent give their child attention?
I would say by maybe taking them out for a drive and, talking with them, maybe going to get something to eat. I would say that would be like spending time, putting time and effort into them.
Asking about things that are going on in their day and life, and doing things with them all the time, being their best friend, being their closest relationship, because that's what you're supposed to be as a parent. How can a parent give to a child?
You can give them time. You can give them gifts, maybe. Maybe if they do well in something, you can have some positive reinforcement there. And it doesn't always have to be that, because then they'll think, oh, I'm only gonna get something if I am good. But also, if you want to show them that you love them, sometimes you can give to them without them necessarily doing something for it too.
Yeah, I think like that would be avoiding saying things like, "Oh, we only give presents to good children, or we only give ice cream to good girls or good boys." Whereas God isn't like that. He gives all the blessings to all of us, like no matter what. I think because He loves us, and so how can I? Yeah, so just giving gifts, and also like not making your child work when they're under the age of 17. I don't think a parent should ever force a child to work under the age of 17. Family violence is defined as any time a child or youth witnesses violence being done by one family member to another. Now we're going to look at practical applications. What source of violence might occur at home? So this would be like physical violence, like between people.
There can be violence between a husband and a wife. So between like the mother and the father, if they're witnessing, if the child's witnessing that a lot, that can affect them. And then there can be also violence between siblings,
Mhm.
between a parent and a child.
Mhm.
So,
Yes. And there's also threatening to hurt them too, like I'm going to do this or that if you don't smarten up. Even if it's as a joke, it's still the fact that you even thought about that could really scare your child. How can parents remove violence from homes?
Maybe removing what they might be influenced by. If the child's watching too many violent shows, it might make them act more violent.
Now we're referring to like actual physical violence between.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, so that makes sense because it would act.
Because I remember when I was younger, if I watched too much action, then I would start, wanting to replicate that between my brother.
You and your brother, yeah.
Yeah, and then so there's that. You can remove that.
Also, having certain standards. We do not hit each other. We do not pinch each other. We do not hit each other. Like I already said, hit each other. But basically, any kind of like abuse, we don't tear each other's hair out. And when you gotta like set a good standard to protect the children from hurting each other and also from you hurting your child. The opposite. Okay, so here we go. The opposite of violence is pleasure, so we will look at ways to practically apply this to parenting. What can parents do to help their children find pleasure in life?
I think by helping them find what they find pleasurable. So helping them lean into their interest, helping them find what they're interested in. Yeah.
Teach them that it's not wrong to find pleasure in life and to enjoy food and to enjoy all the things that we have. Because the Bible actually teaches, if you're going to go from a Christian perspective towards this, the Bible says that God has freely given us all things for us to enjoy. So teaching them that, not teaching them that it's wrong or even sinful to enjoy things, that God has created us to experience pleasure, as it's written that from at his right hand are pleasures eternal. Now, what sorts of thinking patterns encourage a child to take pleasure in life?
I think if you're giving them a good type of work ethic, that type of thinking pattern where you're, when you work hard for something, and then you get to feel the reward of that, of you did this, and this is what you got from it. I think that is one type of thinking that you can.
I think that you can also teach them that not to work to the point of being in a point of suffering or discomfort, but to work and to go easy on themselves and to still do work, but find a way to enjoy it and not overwork themselves. And I think that's another thinking pattern you can give your child. Physical abuse. Physical abuse is defined as any time a person in a position of trust or authority intentionally injures or threatens to injure a child or youth. In Africa, husbands beating their wives regularly is considered right conduct. According to the latest statistics, 96% of African women in Rwanda believe that it is acceptable for wives to be beaten by their husbands. Also, studies have proved that 50% of women believe that being beaten by their husbands is justified if they go out without permission, neglect their children, argue back, or refuse to have sex, or burn food. Now we're going to look at a practical application. It's common practice for husbands to beat their wives in Africa. Do you think that Western society accepts physical discipline towards children as acceptable just because it is common practice here?
I would say, from what I know, it doesn't seem common, but it might actually be one of those things that's surprisingly more common than I know.
I feel like every person I ask almost except for you. When I ask them if they would hit their children to discipline them, most of them say yes.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think it's relatively common. I think that there might be change in the future against that because of some legal stuff, but I think it's a surprisingly common view. Do you think that do you think that that's just because everyone does it, that, like, because it's common, especially in the, like, 10 years ago, everyone did it, and everyone assumed it was right because everyone did it, and in Africa, they assumed that it's right for husbands to beat their wives because everyone does it. All the husbands beat their wives, so it just seems right.
I would say it kind of started from maybe someone, I would say probably nobody wants to see themselves as the bad guy, and so they probably would make, justifications in their head, like, oh, I'm doing this for the better of them, and then maybe those ideas got passed down over time. And another way that could have, started would be if someone has a bad go of life and then they pass that down, they react negatively to how their life went, and then they kind of, negatively act towards their children, and then that child again negatively acts towards the next person. Yeah. So those, I'd say, were two ways that could start.
And even you could look at it from a Christian perspective as well, where Jesus it says in the scriptures in Lamentations 3:33 that he does not willingly bring affliction or grief to anyone at any time. God doesn't do that to people. So what makes us think that we should ever do that to our children? It seems odd if God doesn't do that, why we should, right? Do you believe that it is wrong for a husband to abuse his wife, and why?
Yes, it's wrong because you're hurting that person, and yeah.
Basically that. Basically, because you're hurting them. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's pretty. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Okay. If it's not okay for a husband to beat his wife, why do people think it's okay for parents to beat their children? I think we kind of went through
that.
They
think it's okay because they think it's for the better of them.
Right, but we don't think it's better for a husband to beat his wife, right? Yeah. To discipline her.
Oh yeah, I guess I could go the same thing. The husband thinks it's better for the wife.
Right, because in Africa, the husband beats his wife only for discipline.
Yeah.
Right, so you could argue that the wife would need discipline just as much as a child would, right? So I think that, yeah. Can you think of any effective ways to train children that do not involve physically harming them?
An effective way for me as a child was I would have to stand in the corner. I think, especially when you're a child and everything's so full of, everything's so full of wonder and stuff, it really, really sucks to, it almost feels like you're an adult for a little bit. You're just put in this corner, and then, all that stimulation goes away.
And it's really devastating.
And it just seems, very mundane. And having that mundane feeling as a child, for me, was like...
It's enough to really make a kid feel the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Positive reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how you train dogs, right? You don't train dogs by kicking them. You train them by positive reinforcing them. Because I heard somewhere that apparently if you kick a dog... so there's this example where a man who was a dog trainer, I saw somewhere, he said to me that not to use these sharp collars on dogs to punish them, because if they start doing something bad and you come up and you just rip it on their neck, they're going to be afraid of you and resent you, and they're not going to trust you. They think you're just doing it to hurt them. Right? And children are exactly the same. They don't usually understand why you're hitting them.
So you have to deal with the issue right away.
Yeah.
Because if you deal with it later on, just like pets, the child may not know exactly why they're being punished.
And even if they know why, it's a horrible feeling to know that your parent is hurting you because they're disappointed in you. Just feeling like a parent is disappointing you you is devastating enough. You know? And so this dog trainer said, do not do this because your dogs will become aggressive. They will not listen to you anymore. And they will actually not come to you when you call them because they're going to expect that you're going to hurt them. Okay, so neglect is defined as any time a parent gives chronic inattention to the basic necessities of life, such as clothing, shelter, healthy diet, education, good hygiene, supervision, mental and dental care, adequate rest, safe environment, moral guidance and direction, exercise, and fresh air. So we're going to do a practical application of this. What can someone do before having children that could prevent them from neglecting them?
Definitely you really need to make sure that you want to have a child, and it's a really big decision.
So
What
you'd
can
be
one do
committed
before having children that could prevent them from neglecting?
being neglected by you.
Okay.
Being committed to taking them to their doctor's appointments and their medical care and putting all the time and effort into getting them good clothing, shelter, healthy diet, good hygiene, medical care, exercise, all these things.
And I would say making sure that you're ready for every stage of the child's life. It's not like you can wake up one day and go, "Oh, I don't want to have a child." Once the child's there, you have to.
Yeah, and I think also just making sure you earn the money ahead of time so that you can give these things to your children, like good food and dental care and having an education before you have a child, knowing that you can support them in those ways. What can a parent do to stop neglecting their children if they find that I'm a parent now and now I'm neglecting my child?
Start putting time and effort into them. Money, investing in them to make sure they're, getting their needs. Spending time with them. If you're not spending enough time with them,